Okay, looks like we're mostly here. There's a few others that are registered that I don't see yet online, but we'll get started here since it's right at the top of the hour and we're going to get started. Thank you for joining us. As everyone on the webinar knows, the impact and demands of social media are indeed undeniable. Influences us, and it is an opportunity for us to influence others. The question is how well will you leverage social media to accomplish your God-given vision and purpose as a church? That's what we're hoping to accomplish tonight. Thanks for joining us. The Developing Resources and Building Connections core strategies of the International Baptist Convention are glad to welcome you to this social media strategy with Joy Rudolph. We hope that this will be a rewarding time for you this evening. Just make sure that you can find your chat window there. And perhaps what you could do in the chat window is just make sure that you give us your name and what church you're with. Make sure that on the two, it goes to all panelists and attendees. It's possible just to send a chat to the panelists, but if you would, just go ahead and type in on the chat your name and what church you're with there. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm just going to put IBC Berlin here as I type my name. There we go. Good to see you, Jimmy. Thanks for joining in. Andre, thank you as well. There'll be a Q&A window as well there in just a moment, you'll see, and you might be able to use that as well. But this is our social media strategy. Why, what, and how? We're glad that you're with us. I'm Scott Corwin. I'll be one of the hosts this evening. I'm with the IBC Berlin and one of the core strategy directors of Building Connections. And then with us as well tonight is Judith Lynn Maxwell. She is the Director of Developing Resources. Hello, Judith Lynn. Welcome and glad that you're with us. Tell us a little bit about why you're excited about this evening.
I'm excited about this evening because we're welcoming Joy here to share about social media. Joy works with us in the developing resources area to do the social media for the IBC. And so we're glad to tap into her, her expertise. And this webinar actually came at a request of one of our churches. So we're helping to meet the needs that the churches have.
That's fantastic. That's what we're about. And I'm really happy to partner with Judith Lynn as we combine some of our core strategies to accomplish this. Joy, we're delighted that you're with us. Thanks for being with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, Scott. So I own a virtual assisting company, which means I help clients around my country here in the US and around the world. I think I've been partnering with Lorraine and Judith in the IBC for maybe 2 years now. Does that sound right to you, Judith Lynn? But 2020 will mark 10 years of me working in social media professionally in some capacity for 10 years. So I know a tiny bit about what I'm talking about. And so I hope I can help you today to fulfill your missions through social media.
Thanks, Joy. If it's a tiny bit, then you know a lot more than I know. So I'm really glad that you're with us this evening, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share with us. As we get to this place in our webinar, just make sure that you know where all of the items are. Here's a slide that can help you just find that. If you need to adjust your speaker or your microphone, you go down to the audio settings on the lower left and you can slide those around if need be. Also, just make sure that you realize that there's a place for you to raise your hand. Just kind of let us know if you have a comment or a question. Of course, you can just always ask a question if you would want by just typing in the Q&A, or as well, you can always use the chat just to interact with us, and we'll look forward to interacting as best we can here. As we get started, Judith Lynn, I think you have a poll that you can put up there for us. Just to get started here, just go ahead and take this poll if you would. Tell us which of the following social media platforms do you use currently. And you can choose all of the ones that you would care to choose there. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and other. The idea here is which ones do you actually use for your ministry? Perhaps that's one of the ways that we can figure out these things. Just a couple of more seconds there as you weigh in. Looks like we've got almost everybody weighing in on that. We'll take a peek at those in just a minute. Facebook looks to be pretty popular. A tie between Instagram and YouTube. Be interested in hearing how you guys choose to use YouTube and then other. That's great. Thank you very much for that. As we get started this evening, I want to just begin with a quick word of prayer, and then we'll just turn everything over to Joy for tonight's programming. So let's pray, and then let's just have a moment of just sharing together about social media strategy. Heavenly Father, thank you that you are a part of our lives and we are a part of your kingdom purpose. We pray, God, that you might inspire us and encourage us to use this medium of social media in a way that brings glory to your name. It strengthens our churches and helps us accomplish your kingdom purpose. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen. Amen. All right, we're going to end that polling, and then we're going to go ahead and get on with the rest of this. Judith Lynn, if you don't mind just finishing that out, and I'm going to try to get through to the next slide. Joy, thank you for being with us, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
Thanks, Scott. I did want to mention that I am chewing on a cough drop because I've been sick all week. I don't want you guys to walk away saying, oh, Joy, she knew what she was talking about, but she chewed gum the whole time. So I do have a cough drop, and you'll see that going on. So let's start with why. First and foremost, we're going to start where else but with the Great Commission. And you guys, if we can see more souls come to know Christ through social media, then not using it would be foolish. You see a quote there from my friend Tom Nebel on the screen, and some of you guys know him through his work with Giant Worldwide. But when the webinar is complete, I'm going to get some more resources to you guys that Scott or Judith can send out. But one of them is a great series of articles from Tom on marketing for churches. So we're starting with why. We're starting at the Great Commission. I did want to make a side note that another great resource would be Simon Sinek's video and book of the same name, Start With Why. So if you want to dig really deep, you could get the book and read it. If not, you could just watch the video. But specifically, one way to identify your why is to start with your target audience. And this is going to inform every social media decision you make, from which platforms to use and every other decision you make online. So first of all, for you guys as church leaders, your target audience is probably either people already attending your church who are ideally believers, or people not yet attending your church who are ideally non-Christians. Now, you can create content that is relevant to both groups of people, but you can't do that well all the time. If you promote an event, for example, it may be relevant to people in your church and people outside of your church, but for different reasons. If my goal is to connect with non-Christians primarily through social media, then what I post will be drastically different than if my goal is to connect with current church attendees. Second of all, when we're talking about your target audience, location and demographics matter. Within your target audience, who is your average attendee or ideal potential attendee? Let me help you think through that with some of these questions. How old are they? Are they single or married? What kind of job do they have? Where do they live? Where do they shop for groceries, get their coffee? What do they do for fun? Your answers to these questions will be drastically different if your church is near a military base, for example, as opposed to near a university. Let me give you an example. Let's say your church is primarily young families and the bulk of your attendees are young mothers. So meet Sam, as she likes to be called. Sam is in her early 30s and has 2 young kids. Her husband is in the military and they live near the base. She grocery shops at the store within walking distance of her house because it's the easiest option with the kids. She brews coffee at home every day, but loves to visit local cafes for it on the weekend when she can. As a U.S. expat whose husband works a demanding job, she often feels lonely, even like a single mom sometimes. She doesn't like Facebook, but uses it occasionally to stay in touch with people back home. She loves Instagram and oftentimes connects with other moms through the platform, helps her feel less alone. And she's starting to become passionate about human trafficking and how to minister to people who are trapped in that, horrible thing. So we know so much about Sam just from answering the questions I asked before. And I'm sure just based on that brief example, some of you are already thinking about how you could use social media to love and serve her well, or how you can use social media to connect with someone specific in your church. So what we want is to be good stewards of our time and resources. We don't want to throw arrows in the dark. Knowing our why and our target audience helps us do this. So you have a homework assignment. You can do this alone or with your leadership team and or strategic congregants. But part one is to define your why. And then you want to answer whether your target audience is primarily believers in your church or unbelievers outside of your church. And part two is to create your average attendee or your ideal potential attendee using the questions from before. How old are they? Are they married or single? What kind of job do they have? Where do they live? Where do they shop? What do they do for fun? What are they passionate about? Give this person a name. You could even create a vision board for them and place it in your meeting room, or create a graphic for each of your staff members to keep at your desk. That way you can always be asking yourself what to do both on social media and in ministry to connect most with Megan the college student, or Frank the Army commander, or Sam the stay-at-home mom. So that's your homework. Are we feeling good so far? Any questions, Judith? Okay. So we've talked about our why. Let's move on to what. For the sake of today's webinar, we're going to focus on the big three. While we know that Instagram is primarily photo sharing and Twitter is for short real-time news, Facebook is a free-for-all. And your target audience will inform which platforms you'll use. If you're located near a university, for example, you're going to put more emphasis on Instagram. Whereas if your demographic is older, you'll primarily be using Facebook. Additionally, your communication needs to be tailored to each one. People ask, does cross-posting work? Sometimes, not always. Let me give you an example from my business. My ideal client's name is Richard. Look at him there. Such a successful, nice, smart-looking guy. He's in his 50s. He's been happily married for over 20 years. He has his own consulting business and has previous ministry experience. On the weekends, he likes to spend time with his family, and he's always at church on Sundays. He uses Facebook regularly, but doesn't always understand it. He's on LinkedIn, but isn't using it as well as he'd like to. What that means for me is that it would be a waste of my time to try and get a client like Richard on Instagram when I can primarily connect with them on Facebook and LinkedIn. So that's what I do. On the other hand, what I found for my business is that Instagram is a great place for me to network with fellow female business owners in my local context. So cross-posting doesn't always work for me, but it can in some cases, and that's something you can determine from your why, your target audience, your demographics, etc. So
we have a little bit of a delay there. I want to make sure that we get back into the swing of things there. I have a question that I'd like to ask. Hang on just a second, Joy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I don't know whether we lost a little bit of that, but we lost you right at the end of the ideal client, Richard, there. Could you start again? And do you mind helping me understand what you mean by crossover, cross-posting?
Yes, that's a great question, Scott. I think it had come up in the last webinar, but basically posting this same content across platforms. And there are shortcuts to do this. For example, you could set your Instagram account to automatically post to your Facebook account. And the question would be, should you? And so I am starting back at Richard. Is that what we said, Scott?
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Okay. So let me just do a flyover on my friend Richard. He's in his 50s. He's been happily married for over 20 years. He attends church every weekend. He has a consulting business. He was previously in the ministry. He likes to spend time with his family on the weekends. This is part of the important part. He uses Facebook regularly, but doesn't always understand it. And he's on LinkedIn, but isn't using it to his full potential. So what that means to me is that it would be a waste of my time to try and get a client like Richard on Instagram. He doesn't understand Facebook. So he's definitely not on Instagram. He definitely wouldn't understand Instagram. So I would primarily connect with him through Facebook and LinkedIn. On the other hand, what I found for myself is that Instagram is a great place for me to network with other female small business owners in my area. So sometimes cross-posting can work, not always. So this next slide.
Oh, sorry, a question from Jackie. When I see things cross-posted on Facebook and Instagram, I find it annoying. I'm seeing the same thing 2 times. Can you speak to the potential value of cross-posting versus the risk?
That's a great question. So there definitely is risk. Theoretically, it's going to work well if you know you have one demographic on one platform primarily and another demographic on another platform. If you have people who are falling into the spectrum, like a certain age range, etc., where they're on both platforms actively, yes, that's where it breaks down, right? Where you're seeing where if I, as the church attendee or what have you, are seeing the same thing twice, yes, it starts to fall apart. And that is tricky. I mean, part of it is, can we post the same content to 2 different platforms differently? Yes. So yeah, there's risk involved. It's a hard question for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Joy. That's great. I'll move on to the next slide.
Okay. So you guys, this image is a great reminder of what's not true. It doesn't matter if we get a ton of likes on Instagram, if they don't, for someone like me, convert to clients. It doesn't matter if you get a ton of followers on Facebook if you aren't actually seeing people come to know Christ. So I would say, you know, that one of the true gauges of your social media effectiveness is, are you seeing fruit? If you never get 1,000 followers, or never have a post that goes viral or what have you, if you're seeing people come to know Christ through it, you're winning at social media. So that's a great thing to always keep in mind. Now, let's be practical for a minute. You can't do more than 2 social media platforms well. So, let's say that one more time. Right where you are, repeat after me. You can't do more than 2 social media platforms well.
You can't do more than 2 social platforms well.
So, pick 2 at the most. And if one of them ends up being a waste of time, you can stop doing it. If you're investing effort and it's not getting anywhere, you can stop. You can try a new one, or you can put all your focus and time and energy and resources into the one where you are seeing fruit. A side note is that oftentimes you'll need to be investing time, energy, and resources in a particular platform for 6 months to make an accurate assessment of how it's working for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, don't expect to become an overnight viral sensation. I would say, with the Great Commission being at the heart of why we're doing social media, don't even have that in your head, but don't expect your social media to bear amazing fruit overnight or even in the first month. If it does, awesome, praise God, but expect to have an accurate assessment of what is and is not working after the first 6 months on a particular platform. Another practical tip is that right now, video is the currency on social media. And we are not talking about expensive, overly produced long videos. We're talking about something as simple as a monthly live video with one of your clergy or staff, or a 90-second video about what to expect on Sundays. You could have coffee chat with Pastor Josh, or what's coming next with Sarah. So those are 3 reminders for today. Okay. So I hope you guys are learning some things. I hope you're thinking about some things, how to do things differently or better, or where to get started. So now let's talk about how to put the knowledge you've gained to work, to use. So first of all, who is going to manage your social media? 99.9% of the time, it should not be the senior pastor. I would even go so far as to say that most full-time clergy shouldn't be doing it either. There are some rare instances, like in a brand new church plant, for example, where there may be an exception. But if you're on this webinar and you are a senior pastor, you can take a big sigh of relief, because I'm giving you permission to not lose sleep over your church's social media. But then we have the question, so who should do it? And the answer is someone who loves
Okay, sorry about that. We lost Joy's audio once again here. Hang on just a moment, and hopefully she'll be right back with us. I hope that you guys are benefiting from the why and the what. If you have questions, feel free to go ahead and type those in, and Judith Lynn will intercept those as well. Joy, are you back with us?
Are you hearing me, Scott?
Yeah, we're back with you now. We got to the end of the how, and we were getting ready to go to the next slide.
Okay. So did you hear me say that the senior pastor is not doing social media?
I am so glad to have heard you say that, because it gives me permission not to worry about our social media. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, so now we're going to talk about who should be doing social media.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer to that is someone who loves it and finds it life-giving. This will probably be someone younger, maybe someone in their 20s. This could be a volunteer, but I want to stress that this person be trustworthy. And I would even go so far as to say that you would want this person to sign some kind of legally binding contract. Additionally, this depends on the person, of course, but when it comes to this sort of thing, you get what you pay for. And if you're not getting what you want out of social media from a volunteer, and you can't afford something like a communications director, you could always offer someone a small stipend, etc. Again, any of this is going to work better if you find someone who loves social media and is good at it. An alternative could be scheduling social media. You could use something like Hootsuite, for example, or Crumb for Instagram. One thing to note is that the Facebook algorithm doesn't prioritize posts that are scheduled from a third-party app the way it does posts created directly in Facebook. A workaround for this, if you're needing to schedule social media, would be to schedule directly in the tool provided in Facebook. At the end of the day, however, if scheduling is your only option because of time or budget, I say go for it, because I would rather have you scheduling content than doing nothing with social media. So I'm going to ask Scott to read the Simon Sinek quote that's up to us all.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. We are drawn to leaders and organizations that are good at communicating what they believe. Their ability to make us feel like we belong, to make us feel special, safe, and not alone, is part of what gives them the ability to inspire us. Wow, that's good.
And that's what we want to do. We want to tell a good story online. And if you are a church, you have the best story of all the ages to tell, the good news of the gospel. And one way to tell that good story is through cohesive branding. So this is a huge pet peeve of mine. I can talk about this all day. I won't. Don't worry. But in the last social media webinar, Daryl Evans said that people first visit your church virtually. And that is so true. And everything you do should reflect your church. Whether someone sees you on Facebook or on a flyer in a coffee shop or walks through your doors on Sunday morning, they should have no doubt who you are and what you're about. So what you're about is helping people take their next step toward Christ. That should be clear both on Sunday mornings and in all marketing material. If your logo colors are primarily navy and orange, please do not start using hot pink on social media. If your attendees are primarily college students, don't start emphasizing the children's ministry. Remember, guys, we're talking about our why, our target audience, and those things allow us to create cohesive branding. I feel so strongly about this that I'm going to give you guys some examples. And because this is easiest to see on somebody's Instagram grid, we're going to start with Instagram. This first example, and if you have your phone right now and you have Instagram installed, you can actually pull up these accounts right now and see them a little better. You guys, this is my church, okay? And we're starting with what not to do. And I'm telling you, don't do social media like my church. What we see, we lost my church. There we go. What we see here are some nice images, right? They look good. They make no sense from a branding perspective. What is this church about? We don't know. There's an anime character at the bottom. There's a nice looking gentleman in the middle. Looks like they're having a men's gathering. There's some event with food at the top. It's not cohesive. The individual images are beautiful. But what is this church about? We have no idea. So now let's move to a good example of what to do. Okay, so this is the Diocese of West Texas. It's an Episcopal diocese. So what do we see? We see that they're about people. We see that they're using the same fonts over and over. We see they're using some filters that make it feel cohesive. We can clearly, if we look closely, we can clearly see that they're Episcopal. You know, you got the gentleman, the priest to the right of top there with his Sunday garb. They got the mention of a saint. We know what they're about. We are not confused. Next slide, another what not to do. You guys, this Christian school makes me want to cry when I look at their social media. When I pulled this screenshot, their most recent post was for a chew delay. You guys, we know it's supposed to say school delay, but it doesn't. It says chew delay. And that is the problem, okay? Somebody who obviously just didn't know how to manipulate the image for Instagram. And then we have this nice little thing with the pumpkins and Charlie Brown. Like we said before, with the representation from my church, some of the images are nice by themselves. They're not cohesive together. We have this sweet lady who's selling her cookies for the school. I'm sure you guys have some sweet ladies in your church who would be willing to sell cookies for your church. I'm not saying don't put the sweet lady on the internet. I'm saying do it well. Okay, so that's another what not to do. One more of what to do. So you guys, discovergrace.com. This is Grace Church out of Orlando, Florida. They are one of my favorite examples of cohesive branding across all platforms. Now, I pulled this particular set of images because they have 3 campuses. And what they did, they recently had a baptism Sunday, and they did backdrops for all their campuses for the pictures that were the same. I'm not saying to do this. What I'm saying is they were thinking about how can you walk into any of our services, our baptism services on a Sunday, and know I'm at Grace. I will be welcomed. I will be loved. The culture across all campuses will be true. So that's a great example of what to do, because our next slide, guys, this is what we want. Whether somebody sees us online, virtually, or on a flyer in a coffee shop, or walks through Sunday mornings, we don't want there to be a doubt in their mind that they've come to the right place. Our branding should be so cohesive, whatever we're about. If we're about being welcoming and warm, or trendy and cool, there should be no confusion anywhere that people see our church out in public and in real life. So, another point. If recognizing cohesive branding doesn't come naturally to you, and you don't have the eye of a designer, in addition to having someone do your social media who does have those gifts, I'm going to give you 3 tools, even though the slide says 2, 3 tools to help you with that. So Planoly has a free plan that allows you to try out images in your Instagram grid to see if they're cohesive. So that's great if Instagram is one of your primary platforms. Excuse me, guys. Another affordable option would be to purchase a high quality image filter from Etsy and filter all your images with it. And that you can get a high quality filter between $5 and $35, so that you can use over and over again. That's going to give you a cohesive feel. And finally, you can create some templates for your social media posts to use over and over again. So these are just some little tips and tricks. If you don't have that person in place who loves social media and has a great eye for it, that can help you in the meantime. But here is the number one thing I want to leave you with today. And that is that the difference between doing social media well, the time invested, and doing it poorly is negligible. So why not do it well to the glory of God?
Mm-hmm. That's great. Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think there's a question that we have that we need to ask.
Yes. Joy Ferdion asked this question back when we were talking about who to get involved with doing social media. And it says, how do you manage a team that is responsible for social media? Most of the team members are students who are working too.
Honestly, I would manage it like I would any other team, but here are some ideas. You could use something like a project management software, or something like Slack or WhatsApp to keep communication going. You know, if they're students and they're working, they have busy, flexible schedules. So something to keep you guys all on the same page with communication. And then you also need some type of editorial calendar, so we know what's coming, so we're not having multiple posts back to back, and we're all on the same page. So communication and your scheduling of social media. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. One of the questions that I have, and I'll ask my question, and others of you, if you have questions, be prepared to put those in writing, and we'll ask those, is what are some tips for making sure that we are coherent with our branding? I kind of picked up on some of those cues as you were talking. What would you advise us to consider when we're doing that coherent branding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So first of all, I would start with your logo colors. That's going to be a super helpful guide for you. What are the colors you're already using consistently? They're on your website, etc. Let's just be real honest. If your website is not cohesive, that could be a great starting place. So colors are easy. Now think about your target audience. If your target audience is young families, for example, you might use a lot of images either of young families in your church or geared to meeting the needs of those parents and those children. Whereas if you have a retired community, you're going to be using different images for that. If you have a lot of families of military spouses, right, that's going to change the thing. So we're thinking about our colors, images geared toward our target audience. And then if we're talking about content, third-party content that we're not creating as our church, like articles from another website, etc. Again, we're asking ourselves for that, our average attendee, our ideal potential attendee, what do they need? What is going to resonate with them? And that's going to help us say, you know, this article for moms would be really helpful because I have a church of young families, you know, or if I have a church of retirees, this article on legacy and kind of like a second chance to make an impact, like that's going to make more sense. So colors, images, demographic, all that can really help with cohesive branding.
Oh, that was helpful. I mean, it's not only what you look like, but it's also the content and the target. So that was very helpful. Thank you. I think there's another question that's come in.
Yes. Zernitsa wants to know, what is the ideal frequency of posting on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube?
That is an excellent question. So I do want to make this note that I should have made before. If you Google social media strategy right now, you're going to find tons of things that will come up. And my recommendation for you, whether you're pulling something from today's content or you're pulling something from a guru, pick your strategy and stick with it. Whatever feels like it's going to make the most sense for your church, pick it and stick with it. Because if you're constantly changing what you do, that is not going to help you see that fruit that you get with longevity. And now that I've said that, Judith Lynn, I've forgotten the question. Could you repeat it?
What is the ideal frequency for posting on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube?
Great. So that's how I'm like thinking, that's how I got off on this. So that's one of those things that is going to be debated. But I would say this. As little as 3 times a week for Instagram up to daily. So I would say something like Monday, Wednesday, Friday would be your minimum, but up to daily content. Where we're at, especially in Facebook and Instagram, is that we're getting more return on quality content that resonates with your audience than we are on frequency of posting. So you could certainly post 5 to 6 days a week on Facebook easily. But my question for you would be, if you're just filling space, right? If you're just trying to say, okay, check, I posted today, you're not going to get as much engagement as you would with something that is really and truly for your audience and for your demographic. Those are the last one, YouTube. So the answer to that would be, what are you trying to do with YouTube? If what you're trying to do with YouTube is be a YouTube sensation, right, that monetizes it somehow, then you need to be posting at least once a week on YouTube. If you're just trying to create resources for your church family, for example, then I would say as much as makes sense and is practical for the people creating the content and your church attendees. For example, maybe you guys are recording your sermons every week and you get them edited all up and post on YouTube every Monday. That's fine, right? People who miss Sunday, they can watch the sermon pretty quickly. But again, for something like that, we're asking ourselves, why are we doing what we're doing, and what are we? I'm assuming that most of you guys are not trying to monetize YouTube. Maybe you're just trying to get some resources to your people and allow people who are outside the church to know what's going on within the church. So what's practical, what makes sense, and just be consistent. Do we post once a month on the third Tuesday? Do we post every Monday? Pick something consistent and stick with it.
Okay, another question from Jackie. Would you recommend a closed Facebook group for members? It seems like a closed group could allow for you to share more personal, vulnerable kinds of posts than an open group might not.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jackie, because Facebook groups are getting tons of traction right now, especially with exposure to content, like how much content Facebook is actually letting people in your group see and frequency of seeing that. So my answer would be, if you have the capacity, the time, and the resources to do a group well, absolutely. Because like you're saying, you can share private prayer requests, or maybe, you know, an internal volunteer need or something like that. So I would say, if you have time and resources to do it well, yes. And then again, we're back to consistency, right? So if one of the goals is to collect prayer requests, let's say that we do that every Friday morning. If one of the goals is to make people feel like they're more connected to the senior pastor, maybe he jumps on Tuesdays. So if you have the bandwidth to do it and you can do it consistently, absolutely.
Good, thank you. And from Nikki, our church attracts a wide variety of people that range from cleaners to CEOs. I find it really hard to select a target audience. Any tips, please?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would actually love to talk more about this. Maybe that becomes part of your branding. You know, maybe that's some kind of like all are welcome type thing. Like you can maximize that. You know, you could say, we have the janitor sitting next to the multi-millionaire or something. That's what I would do with it off the top of my head, not knowing all your specific details. Yeah, something like all are welcome, or a church for everyone, or something like that.
And a similar question from Paul. Is there a way to profile our church as one for primarily English speakers? What ideas do you have to communicate to a language group, not necessarily a life situation?
Yes, absolutely. So okay, so I'm just like, I think that I'm guessing that we're overthinking it, honestly. I mean, if your church's target audience, right, are English speakers, you know, there you go. You could use, I don't know if you guys do any type of language classes or not, where like people are trying to learn the native language or not. I don't know if you guys are getting a lot of expats, etc. But yeah, instead of thinking about it as one individual person that you're making the decisions through, think about it, like you said, this common factor that we're making the decisions through. We're a church for English speakers, and yeah, doesn't have to be super complicated. I think you can certainly do that.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, those are good questions, and thank you, Joy, for answering those. I'm glad you had some good ideas, and even though I didn't ask those questions, I'm walking away with some good things. Are there any other questions as we begin to wind down our evening here? We'll have a couple of resources that we've identified, Joy has identified. So perhaps now, Joy, would be a good time for us to look at those, or at least point to those. And if you have any questions while she's putting those out there, just be sure to get them in before we wind down our webinar.
Yeah, so I will send a form that you can email out, Scott, but just off the top of my head, Start With Why by Simon Sinek, either the video or the book. Let me pull up this one article series so I can give you the correct title. Oh, my screen is frozen. Okay, give me just a second, guys. So if you go to tompniebel.com, and again, let me just pull up this series here.
Is it here on the, do we have it here on the, oh, we don't have it on that slide, I'm sorry.
We don't, but let me just pull this up. So his series is Marketing in Ministry. tompniebel.com. You can search for it in the search bar, Marketing in Ministry. There are 3 posts. So Simon Sinek, Marketing in Ministry. Some of the scheduling softwares we talked about were Hootsuite, Grum. We talked about Planoly for seeing your Instagram grid cohesively. Yes.
That's good. That is great. Does anybody else have another question or comment while we have Joy with us on the line? If not, I'm just going to say, remember the why. And I appreciate, Joy, the way that you emphasize the fact that the Great Commission is, of course, our why. And in the IBC, what we're about is we're about multiplying and mobilizing disciple-making churches. And we want to leverage our social media to accomplish that purpose. And as God has called us to reach a specific target audience, that's where we begin. Thank you for that reminder. You've given us some good clues on how we can do that, especially with the big 3, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And then how we do it. The best thing I heard tonight, Joy, was I don't have to do it. That was very encouraging. I'm glad for that. I was also glad to hear some of the tips about the cohesive branding that helps us just kind of focus in a way that communicates who we are as we try to accomplish God's purpose and call on our lives. Joy, thank you again for your expertise. Thank you for your presentation. This recording will be available online, and we will also have attached to that some of these resources that she's referred to as a PDF that you can download to identify those. Joy, would you care to share anything else with us before we bring our evening to a conclusion?
I would just say that last point. It takes so little time to do social media well as compared to doing it poorly. So why not do it well?
That's great. Thank you, Joy. You see right here on the screen, you see her email contact, and we're grateful once again, Joy, for being with us. Judith Lynn, I appreciate you taking care of the Q&A. Do you have any thoughts that you would like to share with us before we wind down our evening?
No, just again, thank you, Joy, for sharing your expertise with us and helping us to do social media better throughout the convention.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And Judith Lynn will be posting this in our IBC resources. If you want to find that, just go to our IBC webpage, go to the developing resources, and you can access all of the webinars that we've done. You can also access other information that we have there to help you be a multiplying and mobilized disciple-making church. Thank you so much for being a part of this webinar. We're delighted that you joined us. If you have any further questions, be sure just to contact either Joy, or you feel free to contact Judith Lynn or myself. Thank you for joining us, and God bless you and your ministry through social media. Thank you, and have a good night.